The red and blue lights flashed behind the sleek black Lexus, cutting through the quiet roadside. Two officers from a small-town department stepped out of their patrol car. One tapped his flashlight against his palm out of long habit. The other adjusted his belt and glanced toward the tree line as if he had all the time in the world. Darius Ellison had been driving for a long stretch of road. He kept his speed steady, made no sudden moves, and carried clean plates. He was only a short distance from checking into a hotel near the center of Macon, Georgia, where a meeting with city officials waited. He wore a navy shirt with the sleeves neatly rolled, no tie, an iced latte resting in the cup holder. He already knew what was coming. In the rearview mirror, the officers approached. The taller one reached the driver's side. His badge read Voss. His jaw carried the hardness of someone who believed he had seen everything worth seeing inside the county lines. His partner, a heavier man with a close-cropped cut and narrow eyes, circled to the passenger side. Darius lowered the window. "License and registration," Officer Voss said without greeting. "No problem." Darius moved slowly, deliberately, and handed over both documents. "Where you headed?" "Business trip, staying near downtown Macon." Officer Rourke peered through the window and noticed the leather briefcase on the seat. Nice gear for a county drive. Darius offered a half smile. "State work, long road." Voss studied the license. "Ellison, that your real name?" Darius blinked. "Yes, that's me." Voss passed the identification to Rourke. They said nothing for a few seconds. Then Voss asked, "Mind if we take a quick look inside the car?" "Yes, I mind," Darius answered quietly, "unless you have probable cause." The air shifted. Rourke's shoulders tightened. Voss leaned closer, irritation clear. "You sure about that?" "Yes, I'm being detained." Voss did not answer. He motioned to Rourke, who yanked open the passenger door and ordered Darius out. Darius obeyed, still calm, voice steady, no sudden movements, only tired eyes and even breathing. A truck slowed as it passed. The driver stared. Darius stood in front of his car with hands visible while Voss began the search. "State work," Rourke said from behind him. "You know how many times we hear that? They love using it like some kind of shield." Darius said nothing. "You think dressing like that means something out here?" Voss added, gripping Darius's shoulder a little too hard. Darius stayed silent. "You're real quiet for somebody with nothing to hide," Rourke said. "What's really in that briefcase?" "My laptop. Notes for tomorrow's meeting. I'd rather you not search them without cause." Voss gave a short, mocking laugh. "Now you're going to tell us how to do our job." "I'm telling you the law, officer." Voss stepped back and showed a thin smile. "You know what I think? I think you've got something in there you don't want us to see. Narcotics, maybe. Something you picked up on the way through Macon. Just a stop, right?" "I'm not answering that." Rourke walked back to the patrol car. Voss stayed close. "Ever been in trouble, Ellison? Ever been arrested?" "No." "You're going to wait right here while we confirm you're legitimate," Voss said, "just to make sure." Darius said nothing. He watched Rourke call in the plate. The red and blue lights bounced off the polished exterior of the Lexus. Across the street, a woman outside a coffee shop held her phone up. Darius noticed. So did Voss. "Don't get smart," Voss said. "You think filming means something." Darius met his eyes. "Maybe." Rourke returned. "Car's clean, plates match, insurance is current." "Lucky day," Voss said flatly. "You're free to go. Just watch yourself." "Always," Darius answered, walking slowly back to the driver's side. He started the engine and pulled away without another word. I had no idea who they were dealing with. Darius did not drive far. He turned into a side lot near the employee entrance of the Macon Police Department's central station, the same place where an internal audit was scheduled to begin. Instead of checking in, he sat in the car for a quiet minute. Not to calm himself. He was used to this. He simply needed to gather his thoughts, decide how to handle what had just happened, and decide whether it was worth opening everything on the first day. His phone lit up with a message from Chief Lila Crow, the woman who had personally requested his transfer. "Let me know when you arrive. I'll wait inside," he replied. "Parking now, coming in shortly." Inside the station, everything was quiet. A few officers talked near the reception desk. The bullpen smelled of old coffee and floor wax. No one looked twice when Darius walked through the glass doors in a blazer, holding a thin file and an identification badge. They saw him first. Rourke stood at the printer, hitting it as if it owed him money. Voss leaned against the hallway wall. drinking cold machine coffee, still in uniform. Their eyes met at the same moment. For a single second, the slow realization settled in. The familiar face they had seen in the dark earlier was now walking into their house. Not in jeans, not driving a Lexus, not silent, but carrying a badge on a lanyard and a stack of documents under his arm. Voss's coffee cup dipped slightly. Rourke actually murmured, "Impossible." Darius did not stop. He walked past them calm and composed, as if he did not recognize them, though of course he did. He reached the chief's office and gave a soft knock. "Come in," she called. Chief Lila Crow was a white woman in her 50s. A former state patrol officer turned department head, sharp, just. She stood when he entered. "Darius," she said with a smile, "glad you made it. You're early." He handed her the file. "Thought I'd get familiar with the place." She gestured to the chair. "How is the drive?" He paused slightly. "Something happened." She raised an eyebrow. "Something happened?" Darius glanced toward the hallway. "Let's just say 2 of your officers made an impression." Lila straightened. "What do you mean?" "They stopped me a short distance from here. No reason. Harassed me a little. Tried to get into the car. Let me go when they realized I wasn't playing." Her smile faded. "You're kidding." "No, ma'am." "You get badge numbers?" "Didn't need to. They're outside. One with the close cut, the other taller and lean. Voss and Rourke." Lila sat back, face serious. "They stopped you. That's not ideal." Darius gave a light laugh. "No, Chief, it isn't." She rubbed her forehead. "And you're sure they didn't know who you were?" "Not a chance." Lila sighed. "We brought you in to look at complaints like this. I guess you didn't even have to go looking." "I don't take it personally," Darius said, "but it did happen to me. Makes me wonder how many others just never bothered to report it." Lila leaned forward. "What do you want to do?" He met her eyes. "I want to meet with them, face to face. No advance notice." "You sure?" "I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to threaten. I just want to see their faces when they realize who I am. That'll be enough for now." Lila nodded. "Give me a little time." Darius stood. "I'll wait in the conference room." In the hallway, Rourke and Voss whispered near the vending machine. "I swear it's him," Rourke said. "Impossible. That guy we stopped can't be." "You think I don't remember faces? He even had the same watch." Darius walked past them again, this time heading toward the conference room with a slight smile. He did not need revenge. He wanted accountability. He wanted them to sweat. And inside the station, the story was about to change. The conference room was plain. 1 large table, 8 rolling chairs, an old whiteboard that had not been cleaned properly in months. One of the fluorescent ceiling lights flickered. Darius sat near the far end facing the door, jacket folded neatly over the chair back. His badge and credentials lay simply on the table in front of him. Time passed. Finally, the door opened, and Chief Crow entered with a folder under her arm. Right behind her came Officers Voss and Rourke, both looking as if they would rather be anywhere else. Voss had traded his earlier arrogance for something stiffer. Rourke's eyes flicked quickly from the badge on the table to Darius's face, then away. "Officers," the chief said, keeping her tone even, "please take a seat." They obeyed without question. Voss sat with arms crossed, trying to hold on to some control. Rourke leaned forward, hands on the table, already sweating under his collar. Chief Crow cleared her throat. "Gentlemen, this is Mr. Darius Ellison. He is not from Internal Affairs. He is Internal Affairs Chief of the Division, appointed recently." Darius looked them in the eyes. A long, uncomfortable silence filled the air. Rourke looked like he was about to speak, then stopped. Voss squinted as if the gears in his mind were struggling to catch up. "You're kidding me," Voss muttered. "No," Darius said, as calm as ever. "You remember when you stopped me." Rourke shifted. "Well, we didn't realize." "Of course you didn't," Darius cut in. "Let's not waste time pretending this was just a misunderstanding. You saw a man driving a nice car through your town. You made assumptions. And now we're here." Chief Crow stayed silent. She knew not to interrupt. "How many complaints has this department received in recent months?" Darius continued. 23, and half of them, mention one of you by name." Rourke opened his mouth again. "That's not—" "Don't lie," Darius said sharply. "There are recordings, there are documents, there are civilian videos of phones being ripped out of hands, traffic stops that escalated for no reason, searches done without warrants." Voss leaned forward. "You were just another guy, all right? You fit a profile. We were doing our job. A profile, Darius said, raising an eyebrow. I'd love to know what that is because from where I was sitting, your job looked a lot more like harassment. Rourke gave a nervous laugh, but no one joined him. Finally, Chief Crow spoke. Mr. Ellison has full authority to investigate any misconduct in this department. This is not just a courtesy visit. Darius nodded. Both of you will be placed under review starting today. That includes pulling every body camera file, reviewing every use of force report you filed in the past year, and speaking with the people named in the complaints against you. Neither man said anything. We'll begin with the stop last night, Darius continued. It was recorded by a bystander. I already have the footage. Voss sat back, jaw tight. This is revenge. Darius shook his head. No, this is procedure. I don't need revenge. I have the truth, and I have the power to do something with it. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then Darius stood, slow and steady. This isn't personal, he said. It's systemic. You've been given years to treat people however you wanted. That changes. Today. He picked up his badge, slipped it into his pocket, and walked toward the door. Finally, Rourke spoke, voice a little broken. Are we suspended? Not yet, Darius answered without turning. But depending on what I find, you may wish you were. He left, leaving the two officers sitting in a silence heavier than any heated argument. What he planned next would surprise everyone in the district. Word spread quickly. The station buzzed with low voices and sideways glances once it became known that Internal Affairs had arrived early. And not just anyone, but a division chief. And not from some distant state office buried in bureaucracy, but a man who had already had a confrontation with two of their own on the way in. Darius felt it in the air the moment he returned to his temporary office, a narrow room on the second floor with a creaking chair and too much fluorescent light. Officers passed his open door but avoided eye contact, some out of curiosity, others out of guilt. Still, Darius did not rush. He sat at the desk, opened his notebook, and began writing a list. Not names, not charges, patterns. Underlined one word at the top of the page, discretion. That was what officers always used to justify their behavior. I used my discretion, but too often discretion became a shield for profiling, harassment, or worse. I was still writing when someone knocked. Chief Crow leaned in. Got a minute? Of course. She entered and closed the door. Those two officers are shaken, and they should be. You want them off the streets for now. Darius thought for a moment. No, let them sweat. Let them see me walking the halls. Let them wonder how deep I'm digging. Lila crossed her arms. You've got everyone's attention. Good. I want every officer here to stop and think twice the next time they touch their belt, raise their voice, or stop someone on a hunch. Some are already reacting, she warned. Saying this is a witch hunt. Darius gave a short laugh. Then let's give them a fair trial. I'll speak at roll call. Face them directly. Leela paused. You sure? At the next roll call, the officers gathered in the break room. They leaned against filing cabinets, drank burnt coffee, adjusted their vests. Some rolled their eyes. Others looked genuinely curious. Darius walked in alone. He did not shout. He carried no folder, no stack of papers. He simply stood near the front with hands in his pockets and a slow, steady gaze. I won't take much of your time, he began. Some of you already know me. Some of you don't want me here, that's fine. I'm not here to be liked. A few heads tilted, a few eyes narrowed. I'm here because this department has a pattern. I've seen the complaints. I've seen the videos. And unfortunately for some of you, I experienced it firsthand. The room grew tense. I'm not a threat, he said, unless you have something to hide. A young officer in the back shifted. Another near the vending machine cleared his throat. I don't care how long you've worn that badge or how many times you've been told you were doing things the right way. If you treat people as suspects before you see them as human beings, you are the problem. He paused. I'm not here to destroy careers. I'm here to make sure the badge you wear means something so the people in this city don't flinch when they see your lights in the rear view. He scanned the room. Even Rourke and Voss stood at the edge. Neither spoke. Neither smiled. Darius finished simply. You will respect the people you serve. You will answer to me. He turned to leave, then added, Also, every patrol car will have its body camera data pulled from the last 60 days. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about." He walked out without another word. Rourke looked at Voss. "He's not bluffing." Voss shook his head. "No, he's not." Back upstairs, Darius poured a weak cup of coffee and opened his laptop. Emails were already arriving. Some officers wanted to speak confidentially. Others had questions. A few even thanked him quietly in the hallway. Chief Crow entered his office later that morning, face unreadable. "Whatever you said down there," she said. "It moved pieces." Darius took a sip. "Good, let them fall." But this was not only about them, it was larger. Most people assumed Darius Ellison was the kind of man who simply ended up in positions of power, titles on the wall, well-dressed, well-spoken, the type who always knew the rules and played them better than anyone else. What they did not know, and what Darius rarely shared, was the night he sat in the back of a patrol car as a teenager, hands cuffed, face pressed against cracked vinyl, terrified that his life was about to disappear for something he had not done. He had been walking home from his after-school job at a grocery store in Athens, Georgia. The night was cold. He had taken a shortcut through a neighborhood he did not usually walk. Someone had just reported a car theft. The description was vague. Black male, tall, hoodie. That was enough. He remembered the flashing lights, the voice over the loudspeaker, the firm order to get on the ground. He remembered the officer's boot pressing into his shoulder blade even after the cuffs were on. He remembered the older woman on the porch across the street, not because she helped, but because she looked away. He stayed in that patrol car for a long stretch of time before another officer arrived with blurry security camera footage and said, "That's not our guy." No apology, no explanation. They took the cuffs off and told him he could go. He walked home shaking, not only from fear, but from something deeper: shame, rage, confusion, and, worst of all, the quiet understanding that no one was going to do anything about it. That night marked everything. Darius never told his mother. She would have been terrified. He did not even tell his closest friends. He simply began asking questions about how the laws worked, about who held authority and who did not, and more importantly, about how to challenge those who abused it. He never intended to become a police officer. In fact, at first he hated the idea. But in college, a professor in a criminal justice seminar changed his perspective. "You want the system to change," the professor said. "Then be the one who writes the report, not just the one who complains about it." So Darius joined the force, not to be a hero, but to understand how things worked from the inside. He learned quickly. He kept his head down when he had to. He spoke when it was necessary. And when he saw officers manipulating reports, using unnecessary force, or lying in court, he did not simply memorize it. He documented it. By the time he was leading internal audits across larger departments in the Southeast, his name circulated in legal circles as the kind of investigator who did not flinch when things got complicated, the kind who made friends nervous and received quiet thanks from those without a voice. But all the promotions, awards, and conference invitations never erased the feeling of that patrol car. The cold, the vinyl, and when he heard that the Macon Police Department was under scrutiny for a rise in civilian complaints, many of them racially motivated, it did not take long for him to say yes. "I don't do soft," he had told Chief Crow during their first call. "If you want someone who gives a couple of wrist slaps and writes memos, I'm not your guy." She did not hesitate. "We've already had enough of that." Sitting in his office with a notebook covered in observations, names, and timelines, Darius thought about that 17-year-old version of himself. Would that boy be proud of this man today? Maybe, maybe not. But he would definitely recognize him. Because even now, respected, professionally untouchable, Darius knew that most people still saw the hoodie before the badge, and that was why he worked the way he did. Not to punish, but to make people live up to the standard they claimed to believe in. He stood, stretched, and looked out the window at the patrol cars arriving for the next shift. Some of them still saw him as a threat. That was fine. He was not there to be anyone's friend, but his mission was no longer personal. It was systemic. By the end of a full day of action at the station, the whispers had turned to silence. Officers who had greeted him casually earlier now passed with stiff nods or avoided him completely. Even the administrative staff grew cautious, triple-checking every file they handed him. And Darius liked it that way. He was not there to make friends. He was there to do what no one else had been willing to do: peel back the layers of a department that had operated too long without oversight. He began quietly, not with accusations but with access. He requested archived body camera recordings, not the training summaries, but the full shifts, the boring hours, the traffic stops that never made it into official documentation. He requested patrol logs, booking sheets, dispatch transcripts, and internal memos going back many months. His inbox soon overflowed. Then came the interviews. Darius did not start with the loudest voices. He started with the rookies, those still new, still too inexperienced to lie well. He sat them one by one in the interview room and asked the same opening question: "What do you think needs to change in this department?" Some deflected, some shrugged. A few told him what they thought he wanted to hear, but a handful of young officers who had seen things that were not right gave him more than he expected. Like the Hispanic officer who mentioned that Rourke once joked about keeping zip ties in his glove box just in case somebody runs. Or the young black woman on patrol who said she stopped volunteering for night shifts because she did not trust Voss when backup was needed. Those were not accusations. They were patterns, small signals, consistent echoes across different voices. Darius logged every statement and compared them with what was on paper. Sometimes they matched. Often they did not. Meanwhile, Rourke and Voss stayed quiet. They kept to themselves, but Darius noticed they checked their computers a little more often now. They kept their desks unusually neat, as if they were waiting for the hammer to fall and did not want to leave anything out when it did. Then, late one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A plain manila envelope slid under the door of Darius's office. No name, no markings. Inside were 5 printed stills from body camera footage, each showing different officers during separate traffic stops. In all 5, the drivers were black. In all 5, the stops were minor. No signal, rolling a stop sign, tinted windows. But in every image, the expressions on the officers' faces were the same: annoyed, superior, and more than once, smiling during a moment of intimidation. Darius looked at the photos for a long time. Someone inside the department wanted him to see this. He checked the timestamps on the screenshots. 3 were from earlier in the year. 2 were only weeks old. The next morning, he called Officer Cameron Reed, a technical analyst in records who had been with the department under 2 different chiefs. "I need the metadata on these stills," he said, handing them over. "Find out who downloaded them or who paused the body camera recording on this frame." She did not ask why. She only nodded and took the envelope. In less than 2 hours, she returned. "They came from an internal viewing terminal," she said. "Username Marnett. Detective Martin Vale downloaded 3 days ago, probably printed them during his lunch shift. Probably didn't want it tracked by email." Darius leaned back in his chair. Martin Vale had been on the force for many years, known for keeping quiet, never making much noise, but never backing down from it either. He was not part of any clique. He was not part of the boys' club Voss used to run on night patrols. Darius found him in the garage checking his patrol car. "Got a second?" Darius asked. Vale looked up, no surprise in his eyes. "You get the envelope?" "I did." Vale leaned against the hood. "I don't want to meddle. I just can't watch this place rot from the inside. I've got a kid growing up here. I need to believe it can be better than this." Darius nodded. "You willing to make a statement?" Vale hesitated, then said, "Only off the record for now." "That's fine," Darius answered. "You've already said a lot by sliding that envelope under the door." I walked away grateful, but knowing that one man's courage would not be enough. He needed evidence, patterns, and above all, the one thing this department had never faced: consequences. But what he discovered was worse than anyone expected. The deeper Darius dug, the less surprised he felt, and somehow more disgusted. It began with simple mismatches: body camera recordings that did not match the written reports, traffic stops described as routine in the paperwork that showed unnecessary aggression on video, citations issued without verbal explanation, people pulled from their cars without warning, searches conducted without consent. But that was only the surface. One clip in particular made Darius stop. Camera from Rourke's patrol car on a night shift. A young man barely out of his teens standing beside his rusted sedan. No weapons, no shouting, only a quiet voice asking, "What did I do wrong?" Rourke answered, "You looked nervous when you drove past me. That's enough." The video cut to the image of the young man handcuffed, sitting on the curb. Nothing in the report mentioned fear, nothing about the tone, nothing about how the boy's voice cracked when he asked if he could call his mother. Darius watched the recording carefully for a long time, then pressed play again, then rewound to that phrase, "That's enough." That was what too many officers believed, that a hunch gave them permission to do anything. It did not end there. He pulled the last 12 use of force reports from Voss. 11 involved black men. 10 of those claimed the suspect had made threatening gestures. Only 3 were backed by video. The rest were vague at best. And one was directly contradicted by footage showing a man standing with his back turned, hands up, before Voss shoved him against the wall. Darius built a timeline. He added timestamps. He cross-referenced arrest records with patrol car camera files. The patterns screamed louder than the recordings themselves. Then came the final push. An anonymous email sent to the department's general inbox, flagged and forwarded to Darius's temporary station address. It simply read, "If you want to know what's really going on, ask about the Monday lists. They don't write them down, but everybody knows." Darius blinked. The Monday lists. He began asking quiet questions, only subtle ones, especially of the officers who did not run with Rourke and Voss. He avoided direct questions, just casual comments about scheduling or routines. It did not take long. A young officer, barely 24, mentioned that every Monday during briefing there was a vague list of target neighborhoods, places where extra attention was expected. No official memo, only verbal suggestions, usually in low-income, predominantly black areas. "You didn't push back?" Darius asked. The young officer shrugged. "I mean, it's not like they told us to find something, but if you came back empty, you heard about it." Darius's pen stopped over his notebook. "Who gives the Monday list?" The answer was quick. "Voss, most weeks. Sometimes Sergeant Clive." That was enough. He walked straight into Chief Crow's office and set the files on her desk. "This department has normalized harassment," he said. "It's not even covert. It's built into how the week starts." Lila reviewed the papers, lips pressed tight. "What are you asking for?" "I want Voss and Rourke suspended while I finish this report. If they stay on the street, someone is going to get hurt. Or worse. Do you have enough to justify it?" Darius looked her directly in the eyes. "Yes." The next morning, both officers were removed from their posts, pending formal review. Neither took it well. Rourke made a scene in the locker room, threw his badge on the table, and shouted about witch hunts and soft politics. Voss said not a word. He only stared at Darius as he passed, eyes cold, jaw tight, like a man who had never before heard the word no. Darius did not flinch. He was already writing the formal report, already organizing names, timestamps, and summaries. He would send it to the state prosecutor's office and the civilian review board within the week. Still, something unsettled him. This was not the end. Something darker still felt buried, and Darius was not finished digging. But when the city found out, everything changed. By the next morning, the story had already exploded. Local reporters learned of the suspensions. A leaked email from an internal staff member, no one claimed it, shared parts of Darius's preliminary report. The screenshots, the stop and search patterns, the Monday lists. Within hours, the cameras from WMZ News were parked outside the station. Cameramen asked questions no one seemed willing to answer. Is it true officers were targeting black residents based on verbal lists? Why were body camera reports missing from internal reviews? Has the police chief seen the recordings? The department struggled to contain the fallout. Chief Crow gave a measured press statement acknowledging the audit and confirming that 2 officers were on administrative leave. She did not say their names, but everyone in Macon already knew. Darius stayed inside. He was not interested in the cameras. He was interested in what would happen next, because for every news story that sparked outrage, there were also people angry at him. Anonymous voicemails began filling the station line. "Who the hell do you think you are? You're trying to destroy this city. You don't belong here, outsider." Darius did not flinch. He had expected the reaction. What surprised him, however, were the others. The black business owner who showed up without notice to shake his hand. The older woman who left a handwritten letter at the reception desk thanking him for finally making this place feel a little safer. The high school student who emailed saying he was now thinking of joining the force because he finally saw someone who made it feel real. But not everyone welcomed the change. That afternoon, a small protest formed outside the station, not for justice, but against it. A handful of locals with signs reading, "Support our police," and "This is a setup." And in the middle of them, standing on the sidewalk with arms crossed, was Officer Voss, off-duty, in jeans and a polo, but unmistakably present. He said nothing. He only watched the building. Darius observed him through the blinds of his office window, sipping lukewarm coffee. He did not feel fear. He felt the weight of how hard this was going to be. Later that night, Darius was invited to the emergency city council session. The chamber was full, not only of officials, but of residents. Some angry, some hopeful, others simply confused. A man in a bow tie stood from the third row. "My son was stopped twice last month for no reason," he said. "He told me he was afraid to drive to work. I didn't believe him. I thought he was exaggerating." His voice broke and he sat down. A woman in her 40s stood next. "We don't want the whole department gone. We want it cleaned. We want it to mean something again." A councilman looked directly at Darius. "Do you really believe this can be fixed?" Darius rose slowly. The room quieted. "I don't promise miracles," he said, "but I promise this. No badge should carry more weight than the truth. If you want this department to serve everyone, then we hold it accountable, starting now." That drew some applause, some nods. After the meeting, Chief Crow found him in the hallway. "You spoke like a mayor," she said. He smiled ironically. "Never want that job." But the damage and the healing had already begun. Voss filed a formal complaint the next morning, claiming the investigation was biased. Rourke tried to contact a lawyer, but no one in the city wanted the case. Meanwhile, the Civilian Review Board called an emergency vote. Should the Macon Police Department submit to a full external audit? The result was unanimous. Yes. Darius's role was now expanding. What began as a quiet audit of misconduct had become a complete restructuring of leadership, policy, and trust. And there was no turning back. But Darius had one final move to make. 2 weeks later, in the public phase, the station felt different. Not quieter, simply heavier, as if the weight of old habits was finally being noticed. Doors that used to swing wide now closed more slowly. Conversation stopped when Darius entered a room. Eyes lifted but did not look away. He had issued no fiery speech since the council meeting. No dramatic changes, only quiet day-to-day work, peeling back the layers. Yet some changes arrived anyway. The police chief resigned. Chief Lila Crow called Darius into her office early one morning. She sat at her desk, the badge in a velvet box beside her keyboard. "I've done what I could," she said. "But if this city is going to move forward, it needs a different voice. One that doesn't come with my baggage." Darius respected her decision. She had not fought the audit. She had supported him when the pressure rose, but she also knew when it was time to step aside. "You're not quitting," Darius said. "You're making space. That matters." She nodded. "You'd better make it count." Her departure caused a stir in the department. The city appointed an interim chief, Vivian Hale, a black woman who had spent her entire career cleaning departments like this one. Firm, fair, notoriously allergic to politics. With Hale now leading and Darius continuing the audit, the department shifted from fear to action. A mandatory retraining program began for every officer. Traffic stop protocols, use of force policies, handling of civilian complaints. Not just box-checking seminars, but hands-on workshops led by outside consultants. Some officers objected. "This is overreach," one muttered during shift briefing. Darius heard it and answered without raising his voice. "You can leave and look for work somewhere else." That closed it. But resistance came from outside as well. A local radio host spent a full hour talking about outside interference and cultural overcorrection. Darius did not respond. He did not need to. The facts already spoke. In the following weeks, civilian complaints dropped. Community members began showing up at the station's open house days. Church groups brought lunches for the staff. Some high school students visited as part of a civic leadership program. Even the skeptics noticed the change, not overnight, but real. Still, for every step forward, Darius remained cautious. One afternoon, Officer Cameron Reed stopped by his office with a printed report. "This just came in," she said. "Officer Raymond made a routine stop this morning. White truck, tinted windows, but the driver recognized him. called him by name. Darius raised an eyebrow. Said he remembered Raymond from before, Cameron continued. Said he used to act like he owned the whole street. Today he looked him in the eye, told him exactly why he was stopped. No attitude, just did the job. Darius smiled faintly. Progress. Still, he was not interested in surface changes. He pushed for permanent reforms. Every patrol car would now carry a body camera with dual audio synced to the officer's badge microphone. Disciplinary actions could no longer be buried in internal-only reviews. They had to be reported to the Civilian Review Board. A new community liaison role was created, responsible for building connections with neighborhoods that had been over-policed and underheard. Some of the older officers complained, but some of the younger ones leaned in, like Officer Janie Brooks, 2 years on the force, who requested reassignment to the newly formed Community Trust Unit, or Officer Malik Fenner, fresh out of the academy, who asked Darius during a meeting, "How do we make sure we don't end up like them?" Darius's answer was simple: accountability every day, no shortcuts. He spent long nights writing, drafting final summaries, cross-referencing forms. Every name on the paper was not just an entry. It was someone who had been stopped, searched, humiliated, and often forgotten. Darius did not want them forgotten anymore. The final version of the audit would be released publicly the following month. By then, he would already be gone, back to Atlanta for the next assignment. But he hoped they would remember what came out of this. Not him, not the scandal, but the change. The realization that trust in a badge is not automatic. It is earned. Yet beneath everything, Darius knew that change takes time. On his last day, Darius stood alone in the patrol car lot. The morning sun cast a long shadow across the asphalt, and the air was thick with humidity. Officers passed with quick greetings, some genuine, some by habit. He was not looking for gratitude. He only wanted to see if they still met his eyes. Most did. He closed the door of his temporary office slowly, holding the final printed audit in one hand. 140 pages of truth, names, timestamps, quotes, and recording logs. None of it exaggerated. None of it softened. Only what happened and who made it happen. The station was quieter than usual. He walked the halls not to make a scene, but to say a silent goodbye. Some officers thanked him. One shook his hand. 2 avoided him completely. Downstairs near the main entrance, Interim Chief Vivian Hale caught him before he left. "The report is solid," she said, tapping the folder. "Hard to argue with facts." "I don't need them to agree with me," Darius answered. "I just need them to know that someone is paying attention now." She smiled slightly. "You sure you want to go back to Atlanta?" He nodded. "I was never meant to stay here. This was just part of the work." She looked him in the eyes. "Still, you didn't treat it like just a job. That's rare." He did not answer right away. Then, "I had to." Outside, the media trucks were already gone. The protests had faded, and on the street in front of the station, the same restaurant where Darius had been watched and judged on his first night, a young black man in uniform now sat eating breakfast at the counter. Darius paused. He took the moment. That kid would never know what happened behind the scenes, but he would walk into his shifts with fewer targets on his back, and that mattered. Darius left the city with the windows down, letting the wind touch his face. He did not need ceremony. He did not need applause. He only needed to know that for once the power had worked for someone instead of against them. Later that week, back in Atlanta, Darius gave a small talk at a criminal justice symposium. Nothing fancy, just a folding chair, a microphone, and a group of students still trying to figure out where they fit in the world. One of them, a quiet girl in the front row, raised her hand. "Do you ever think it's pointless?" she asked. "Like none of this really changes anything?" Darius looked at her for a second, then answered, "It changes slowly, sometimes painfully, but the goal isn't to change everything at once. It's to stand in the space between what people can get away with and what they should be held accountable for. That space right there, that's where change begins." He stood, gathering his notes. Every system, every badge, every desk, every courtroom is only as good as the people willing to hold it accountable. So ask the hard questions. Say out loud what others stay quiet about. And when someone tells you that what you're doing doesn't matter, he paused, making sure everyone was watching. Ask them why that makes them so uncomfortable. The room stayed still. No applause. Only thoughtful silence of the kind that lingers. And that was enough for Darius. Because change does not look like a parade. It looks like paperwork, like policy, like someone who refuses to let silence win. And never judge too quickly. You never know who you're talking to, and, more importantly, who's watching you.